And I had to sit him down, and this was like the roughest conversation I've ever had, like with a kid. And I basically was like, bad stuff happens to good people every day.
That's good.
Bad stuff, just something really horrible happened to you.
Yeah.
But we can't, this is not going to be it.
And it wasn't because of, like, it wasn't because
of you saying that you're the best at what you do.
So how did you win the assistant principal of the year? Was it like a competition, or was it a point? Like,
I didn't even know I was nominated. So
they surprised you with it?
It surprised.
Nice.
So they have this OCASA. So it's like Orange County Association of Counselors, which to me is like just like the highest honor, right? People that you lead are saying that you're the best at what you do.
It's not like you appointing yourself.
It wasn't like me. Hey, I was like, hey, so where's the Google form on
give
this?
myself an award.
And so as a teacher that's had to, an administrator too, that's had to like bury kids and speak at their funerals, I'd much rather see them out in the community.
Yes. 100%.
And so, or doing something. And it's a few kids that like come to mind, quite honestly, that I haven't seen, that I want to know where you are.
Raise those salaries, just double all the teacher salaries.
If you double them,
problem solved.
Well,
and you won't need a lot of those non-classroom positions because you don't need to coach and teach teachers that are super well paid because they're motivated and they're, now they're having to apply for it and there's competition. So they'll just, like, I just naturally did better. I was more motivated to do my job well when I was paid well. Good day. Welcome back to the For Education podcast. Fired up to be here today. Fired up for today's guest. Today we are with Amanda Jenkins. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited. It's my first podcast. So
thanks for coming in person too. You came all the way out, fought the traffic.
Yes. Well, I had to be here for you. Anything for Mr. Johnson.
I appreciate that.
I still call you Mr. Johnson.
It is weird. You go from like a last name basis when you work with somebody in school. And then I got a guy I work with now who I always known him by last name, but it's like everybody else calls first name. And it's just kind of like, you can't make the switch.
I can't, like that's the way I was introduced. So it's just like always last names.
So for those out there that don't know who you are, give us a little background. Where are you from? What was growing up like for you?
So I'm from Orlando, Florida, born and raised. I am the youngest of 4 siblings. My mom has a daughter. My dad has 2 other sons. I also grew up with like another like stepbrother growing up. And I'm my dad's only girl. My mom's youngest girl. So I'm youngest of everybody. So that just sets up the plot for the rest of my life.
I love it.
being the youngest child. Graduated from OCPS, went through Florida A&M, got my master's through North Central, started working on my doctorate some short time ago, and I've been working at OCPS now, Orange County Public Schools now, for almost 15 years.
Impressive.
So yes, I have been around the block a little bit.
So taking it back, that many older siblings, were people telling you what to do all the time growing up, or did you just get
I was telling them what to do. Hence has set some of the rest of my life. I was telling them what to do. Like, what you mean? My sister, her and I were just actually talking the other day, and so she was like, "Man, I was admired how you just like did whatever you wanted to do, and then the fallout just what it was." And I was like, "Yeah." That's how I live my life. It was kind of like get with it or get lost sort of mentality, and it's kind of been that way ever since. So now I was telling them what to do. I know my parents, they were like, "This girl," because if I put it into the atmosphere, I was going to do it, whatever it was. So
I love that. So did you want to be a teacher growing up? Or were they like, "Hey, you love telling people what to do. You should have a job where you tell people what to do"?
No, like teaching was like I never thought about teaching. As a matter of fact, I wasn't even that fond of school. But even though I excelled, I was in the honors classes. I did all the things, but it was like school. All right, it wasn't like I wanted to be a teacher. I actually want to be a broadcast journalism major.
Awesome.
And so
welcome to the big studio.
I know. Welcome to the big leagues. I finally made it. Took some pit stops, but awesome. I was in the J school at Florida A&M.
Okay.
And I was writing for a newspaper there. And so I covered some pretty big stories while I was there. Cool. The Havana Herald, which is like this little city outside of Tallahassee, but we were required to do an internship. And so I started to work there. And that's when I quickly realized that you don't make any money starting off in broadcast journalism. I was being paid $2 a line for whatever study. So I went to all of the town meetings, city hall meetings, all of the like community events and organizations. I covered all of those, and then I had my own op-ed section.
Okay.
And so I would get my little check of like $95 every 2 weeks. And then I saw my friends who were in the J school when they started going to get internships. It was really about like traveling and going to different places and putting yourself out there and internships and stuff. And I had a child at the time, so I went to college with my daughter. And so those opportunities didn't work out for me. So I fell into education because it was like consistent check, and I just got good at it by accident.
Yeah. So you were basically like, there's no money in journalism. Let me become a teacher.
Yeah, because there's so much more money. There was so much more money in education, so I decided to make that switch.
Well, you crushed it. So backing up, where'd you go to high school?
I went to Olympia High School.
Okay, so you go to Olympia. You're looking at colleges. Was FAMU like where you wanted to go, or how did that come about?
So originally, yes, I always wanted to go to Florida A&M University. My mom went to Bethune-Cookman.
Okay.
I said college because when she went in, it was Bethune-Cookman College.
Okay.
And she had the whole experience, pledged all the things. And so I had been raised around HBCU culture.
That was on the horizon. HBCU,
my whole life. It was HBCU culture. And that was what I was destined to do. But then when I got to going into my senior year, I was pregnant with my daughter. And so, of course, that changed some things. So I decided, okay, I'll just go to community college because I was doing community college dual enrollment at the time.
Cool.
So I said, okay, I'm just going to get a jump on it and I'll just stay there. But I was having a conversation with one of my friends one day, and they had all gotten their acceptance letters to FAM, and they were ready to go. And so she was like, you should still try to go to school. You should you're too smart to like stay here in Orlando.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, because I don't have a babysitter. Because I'm thinking college is like party time. Like, I don't want to be the one like, I can't go. I need a babysitter, And so she was like, oh, well, we'll babysit. And they never did, but it was fine. And so I ended up applying to Florida A&M, and I ended up getting in. I actually applied to numerous universities and got into UCF. And I think the only one who denied me was FSU. I haven't forgot about it, FSU. They denied me, and that was the only one. But Florida A&M, when they accepted me, it was natural choice because they ended up having family housing on campus.
Cool.
So me and my daughter were able to move in the dorm there. So it's kind of like a full circle moment with her going actually back to Florida A&M because she graduated this year. And so she'll be back on the hill where she started because she was not even 1 year old when we were living there.
Wow, that's super cool. I didn't even think about that full circle connection.
Yeah,
So them having family housing was like the game changer. Because when you shared that last time, I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing. I
don't even remember how I thought it was a thing. I think my sister or someone told me because they had people that were completing like their doctorate programs and things. But at that time, you have a family.
Right.
So they did provide some. So I was living in Palmetto North. That was that time. That was a designated family housing. And another full circle moment, it was the same dorm that my sister lived in when she went to school, and they had converted it to being family housing. So I have pictures of myself like being 10 and like 7 or 8 years old, being in that same dorm room and then moving back to those places. So it's just a lot of like full circle moments that always led back to Florida A&M. And that's why it has like a special place, of course, in our families.
That's cool. And Bethune was in the family, and there's kind of a rivalry there. So
there is. My mom, she went to Bethune then, but Bethune is expensive, so
it's private.
It's private and expensive. So she went there when it wasn't expensive, of course, as expensive.
Right.
And so she left there with no student debt, and she went on to get her master's.
That's awesome. How important was the HBCU experience for you? And do you think there was any extra pull to it because you went to Olympia? Was it like, I want to go to an HBCU, or was that part of the thought process?
For sure. Olympia at the time, the demographics have changed quite significantly now.
Yeah.
But back then, it was the relief for like all of the people living like in Metro West Windermere area.
Right.
So we were definitely the minority there, and you found like pockets of your people, of course, and I was able to converse with everybody because the unfortunate thing is that in those advanced courses, you aren't going to be around a lot of minorities, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so in those advanced, or even in the dual enrollment program, of course. Like, I'm not even really on campus with my same age peers. But so the HBCU experience just became extremely critical because I wanted to feel what it felt like to be in the majority.
Yeah.
And, you have your whole life to be a minority is what my mom says. And so, of course, she just promoted that HBCU experience for us. And we got to see camaraderie. We got to see, the bands. We got to see all of the things that, growing up that just became staples in our everyday lives.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's super cool. So did you go straight out of college into teaching, or what was because you were in journalism and then you were
I was in journalism.
Did you switch your major? How did you kind of get over to the teacher track?
So, and it's funny though, I came from a non-educational background, of course. Yeah. So I ended up just wanting to get finished with college, and I transitioned to a general studies degree, whatever that means. So I got a general studies degree.
Good at everything.
Good at everything, whatever. Generally speaking, I'm good at everything. So I got a general studies degree.
Cool.
And I got into education, but it's so crazy when you have to, like, that whole not coming from an education background, that transition process. Nobody ever really they lead you through it, but I felt so lost going through like the educator preparation program and trying to come from like getting your certificate and applying and only
like temporary and permanent. Yeah.
And that general knowledge test almost took me out of the game.
I would have thought general studies would prepare.
You would have thought I had a leg up on the test. I did not. It was just like that transition was definitely difficult. So it wasn't straight out of college that I went in there. There was some like in between picking up like odd jobs. But then when I first got my $37,000 salary as a first year teacher,
that's mine too.
$37,500. Don't forget the 500. Yes. $37,500 so the salary in whatever year that was, 2013, 2014. It was, the rest was history.
Yeah, awesome. So you start teaching. You got your daughter. Did you go in? You started elementary?
I started in elementary.
Okay.
Started in elementary. I worked at elementary school, Lake Gym. So I started working with students with disabilities. Yeah. And so I was working with pre-K students that had developmental delays and then autism. Okay. Some of them were diagnosed pretty early with autism. They usually don't like to diagnose students, but some of the students were quite obviously autistic. Right. And some where we just couldn't tell whether like maybe you're developmentally delayed, just having some little setbacks versus like full-on diagnosis. So I started there. And then that's how I kind of fell into working with students with disabilities. Cool. And that had been my path going forward throughout my educational career. I moved on to middle school, and I started working with our intellectually disabled units. Okay. So I worked in the self-contained unit. And that was like by far probably one of the best experiences.
Really?
Yeah, I loved working with varying exceptionalities. I had kids with Down syndrome, intellectual disabilities, just deaf, hard of hearing, visually impaired, all the things happening in one room. Wow. with all these different kids. And it was me. I had an assistant teacher who I loved to death. She was so awesome. Miss B. She was great. Cool. And those kids were wild because they still have pre-teenager personalities. Yeah. They're still going through pre-teenager things. Like they're dating. They're breaking up. They're not talking to their best friend. It was a lot, but I love them. That was probably by far my best experience. And then, but you have to have a lot of structure, right? And then that's how I fell into behavior support. Okay. For ESE students. And once I started into behavior support for ESE students, that set me up to start working in discipline, and where I started like honing a lot of my different skills with organizational management.
That's what took you out of you were a teacher in the self-contained classroom. Yep. You had assistants, and then you moved into
the behavior support role. Okay. And that's how I got out of the classroom. Cool. And then, but of course, even behavior support, you find, even though you're supposed to be out of the classroom, you're in the classroom or out of the classroom.
You can't really support it from out of the classroom.
Exactly, because with behavior support, we were that could be restraints. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Wow.
we weren't rap matting kids there, because if you had to be rap matted, which is like a device that they use, you have to go to like the more extreme schools.
Right.
But I mean, it was kids 6'2", 300, 400 pounds.
Yep.
I'm like, the only way he would walk to the extended day if he walked backwards. I'm like walking him backwards all the way through. Or if they have a meltdown somewhere, they're calling you.
Yeah.
So just kind of keep their routine consistent, and like providing support to the teachers, because the teachers are there to teach.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily have the skills to de-escalate a situation that might require like physical intervention. So I had a lot of physical intervention in that role.
Do you figure that out as you go, or is there like a training that teaches you these are disabilities, this is how you deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, and I think you get to learn the kid and their specific things. I don't think there's anything that can prepare you.
You've seen it all.
Anything that you can prepare you for.
Yeah.
Having to walk a kid backwards because it just dysregulates whatever that they're ruminating on at the time. So it's just working through those different things for each kid to be able to like support them.
Okay, that's awesome. So where on the journey, you and I crossed paths at Carver Middle School.
Yes.
And I remember, I mean, there's a new school, a lot of teachers, so you don't really know who's who. And you did like a training or a PD on, because you were working with the SE kids, exceptional students, for those that don't know.
Yes.
So how did you get to Carver Middle School? And most people don't know the story. How do you describe that experience for you? Because I feel like I need to write a book on those 3 years.
Oh, it is the most stressful, rewarding thing ever. You know, I didn't bury a kid till I worked at Carver. Like I had not, and I actually buried 2 during my tenure there. But it was, so I was working at the middle school, and my current principal was moving on, I think, to like charter schools or something. Okay. And so I don't know if you know, but I'm not a big fan of change because I like to be in charge. Right. So I'm like, I don't know who this is. Okay, I'm moving on. But the Carver opportunity came up, and it was an extra like 20-something thousand. It was per year for 2 years, and another 25,000 or something like that. Whatever it was like an extreme amount of money.
Yes.
And I started letting everyone who I knew that knew someone that was going to that school that I wanted to go.
Any connection you had,
any
from
connection
anywhere in
I
life.
had, like, hey, I know you're the superintendent's niece's cousin, aunt. However,
I need to work here.
What can I do? And so I just applied. But I did have some people working in the background advocating for me, for sure. My principal was definitely one of them. And people had told them like I was really good at what I did as far as working with ESC students. Cool. And that demographic, that specific subset in the demographic that attends Carver is a very high needs population.
It's like they're already high needs, and it's just escalating.
Right. Add on the fact that they're 6 grade levels behind. Right. Add on the fact that they are having, they've been diagnosed with EBD. They're supposed to be taking medicine, but they don't take the medicine. So it's a lot of different factors that go into that, which ultimately led to me leaving Carver. That's a whole nother story. But that's a different story towards the middle of this podcast. But so I had people kind of like work for me in the background saying like, this is a good candidate, this is a good candidate. But I still, of course, I had to interview. Yeah, I had to get there and like prove that I needed the job, because I was up against 600 other applicants that had applied.
There were 900 is what I heard. Yeah.
It was something ridiculous.
Which, to give some perspective, in my experience in teaching in Orange County, there would be, in general, like 9 openings and 1 person applies. So you're used to, you apply, you get the job. And in this case, 60 positions, 900 applicants. Yes.
And I heard that they were like showing up to schools to like pop up on you in the middle of the day to see how you were doing.
Makes sense. Yeah.
That it was like this strenuous process, but I never had to go through any of that, because in ESC, I don't think people really know much about it.
And you don't really want to surprise people in that scenario.
Yeah, you don't really want to surprise me when I'm like in the middle of a de-escalation sort of thing. And so, I interviewed, and coincidentally, the first that interview I had was with the now chief of academics, was with Dr. Schuler. Cool. And my first job in the county, I was actually like taking kids from her school. And when I told her what I did, she was like, that was my school. And so I'm like, I'm effective. And I brought this portfolio, I bought a binder. And from there, I probably got the email or call. I got a call from Miss Dorset.
Yes.
And I was in the Dominican Republic.
Oh, on vacation?
I was on vacation. In the Dominican Republic, and I got a call from...
I'm glad the call went through internationally.
I had made sure. I called. I'm like, hey, I just want to make sure that this
I'm going to need this
work.
job.
I'm going to need this phone to work wherever I am. And it did. And I took the call. I think I had just landed, and I was accustomed to something crazy. And I'm like trying to sound like I'm not on vacation. I'm like, hello, mute. Like, trying to make sure she doesn't hear like,
awesome.
Mary Accident bands in the background. And she offered me the job. And from there, I started at Carver, and I think that really evolved who I was as a leader, as a person, because it changes you for sure.
That's awesome. I remember vividly, and I tell this story because I want to remember as many details as possible. But I remember it was May 2017. I've been teaching for like 5.5 years at that point, something like that, maybe 6.5. And an email goes out to the whole district. For those who don't know, Orange County Public Schools, like 7th, 8th largest district in the country. So this email goes out to thousands or tens of thousands of teachers. Any teacher that works at Carver Middle next year will earn a $20,000 bonus year one, 25 year two, 25 year three. And I read it, and I remember I was like, there's a typo. They meant 2025.
Surely.
So I read it like 5 times. And I always said I'll never teach middle school. Like, I don't want to teach middle school. That's not my age range. That's not the time of day I like. Like, I'm a high school guy. And I got the email. My wife and I had some debt. And I forwarded it to her. And I was like, maybe I'm supposed to teach middle school. Maybe I should apply for this job. And so it was, and I went to my assistant principal. And I was working at Oak Ridge. So it was like some of the kids from Carver went there. And it wasn't like a foreign concept. But I remember I went to my assistant principal. And I was like, hey, would you recommend me for the Carver job? And he was like, yeah, I'll recommend you. He's like, but are you sure you want to go there?
I got that question 100 times.
He was like, just Google it. And you Google it, and it's like, boy lights girl's hair on fire. That was the most recent thing, which is sad that was what was in the news. But that was what pops up. And I was like, look, man, like I'm going. And so, and I remember I applied, and I didn't hear anything for like a month. And I was like, well, I guess this isn't happening.
Same.
And then I think maybe this was your experience too, but I think they took care of all the core teachers. And like reading and math obviously was the focus. And so, to give context, the old Carver building had asbestos in it. They were tearing it down. They got a new building, new administration. They were making all 60 teachers that already worked there reapply for their jobs. Only 6 got to stay. And then 900 people applied for those 60 positions. And so it was like, I think though, by the time I got there, because I too had a few like connections that I was like, hey, remember me? Like,
remember the time I helped you change your tire?
But I'd worked with like a few key people there, and so remember, I don't know if any other computer teachers interviewed, but I was it. And so, they were going 1-to-1, and I had already been 1-to-1 in high school, so I feel like it was just a match made in heaven. But we got there. You did your training. We had like his motivational speaker come in. We were all fired up for the first week of school. Hurricane comes through and closes like a week in. We miss like 2 weeks, lose all momentum. And then like the Wi-Fi never really worked right the first year.
It never did.
And we just had like obstacle after obstacle. And I remember teachers quit. They walked away.
Like first day. They would go during their lunch break, during their planning, and was like, hey, I'm not going to be able to do this anymore. You're like, what? Oh, we're going to get it for the rest of the day? You can't hold off until the afternoon? They're like, no. I actually feel like right now you get a 2-minute notice.
We lost a security guard. We lost a dean. There was so much stuff going on. And I remember like it was a hard transition. Like middle school was hard. Yeah. The technology was hard.
Do you remember they were crawling out the window? You don't work anymore. It's fine. Remember they were crawling out the window of your room? Remember they crawled out the window? I said, no, who did crawl out the window of Mrs. Johnson's classroom?
I had so many areas. It was such a big room. I was so excited.
Yes.
So I remember I was like, I'm going to have a new building, new computer lab. I remember going from high school. I was like, oh, the class size limit's smaller in middle school. I'm only going to have 22 kids. I saw my room. I was like, where's the computers? And no computers for my computer class. But I was like, oh, I got this huge room. I'll have like my kids over here, and I'll have these like breakout tables, and like small groups.
Innovative.
Over here. And then day one, I'm like 22 kids come, 25, 26, 27. They keep coming, like, 35, 36, 37. Like,
That
keep track of everything.
room used to be packed.
It was 45 at one point.
Yes, that room used to be packed, all with kids who had never had a personal digital device.
Yes.
At least not for school. They hadn't had one because it was new. The rollout was new.
And and I remember this first night with the last day of the first quarter. It was a Friday. It was a Friday of the last day of quarter one of that year, and unannounced, the superintendent rolls it. So it was like assistant principal, 3 suits that I didn't recognize. Barbara Jenkins herself walks into my classroom, and I was like, if she came an hour earlier, an hour later, I'd have been fired on the spot. But my kids were like, they were zoned in. And she came in, and I remember on the way out, Ray was just, he kind of like, they closed the door, and he was like, I was like, all right, like we're sticking this thing out. Yeah. This is gonna be good.
Y'all know what to do when people come in the room.
And it ended up being like the 3 years there. Like I kind of felt like I became the guy, but the experience was unique because there were no new teachers, there were no inexperienced teachers. Everybody there was awesome at their job, and I felt like we just kind of united on this like 3-year like adventure.
Yeah, I and you know what's fun though? I still worked with some of those people. That's awesome. Like I was still able to like call Krosky, hey, you want a job? Hey, Victoria, who's now AP, like she came and was my literacy coach when I became an AP. A guidance counselor who put those 45. I'm gonna tell her about that. That guidance counselor who put those 45 kids in your room. She came to be one of my guidance counselors last year. Yeah. So, and then like another one, Miss Mackey, she wrote a letter of recommendation when I won Administrator of the Year this year. Yeah. So it was like people who I still keep in contact with on a daily basis that doesn't even live here. I don't know if you remember Mr. Henderson.
Yep.
Virgil Henderson. We still he is so aggravating.
Pastor now, I think.
Yes, he's something. But that was my guy. That was like my little school bestie. And so we still keep in contact because there is no other experience like working at Carver Middle School. I remember it like it used to get crazy where the before when officers used to be like hands-on with kids. I don't know what they were doing in other schools. Yeah. But in our school, you needed to be hands-on.
Very hands-on.
You had to be hands-free on in that campus because it was like insane at some time. But I think eventually as the years went on, when we started to like build momentum. We built a culture. And they began to trust us, which is so unfortunate when they cut off the money.
Right.
We all, including me, like I took flight because the emotional toll that it takes on you. Right. I didn't realize I was tired until I stopped working at Carver Middle School. I didn't realize how much work I was doing. I remember I went on vacation. I think I went to Germany for like 8 days. And I had, who my kids were.
Yeah.
And they had to set them up on this plan of like earning McDonald's and Burger King and all things every day if they just did not tear up the school while I was gone. And I remember I had to call and check in with them like roaming in Germany saying, what are y'all doing? Put me on speakerphone. Who is that? What's going on? Just to make sure they were doing it. And I've had kids reach out to me years later. Andrew Fountain was one of them. He was he graduated most recently, and he had his behavior specialist, Chris Goodwin, reach out to me saying like, hey, I have this kid. He talked about you, and I told him that I knew you, and he wanted to say hey. Wow.
That's I think the 3, like if you made it, because year 1, most of the kids there were from the previous Carver, and then year 2, I feel like by that 3rd year, that was we had built it. It was no longer kids that were from the old building.
Yep.
And you kind of build a culture over 3 years, and it sadly ended on COVID, and like we didn't get to see it through. But I feel like every year it got a little bit better, and we got to build part of that culture. And I remember this one kid. You're not allowed to sell stuff in the hallway, but he was always like in his backpack, like selling chips and stuff. And I'm like, dude, like, where do you get your stuff? And he's like, oh, the dollar store, CVS. I'm like, bro, you got to go to Costco down the street. Like, we made a spreadsheet. I was like, this is how much it costs. This is how much profit you could make. I was like, how much can you sell a day? And, I was like, man, if you got your stuff at Costco, you can buy a car by the time you get to 10th grade with cash. Oh, my goodness. But it was like all about, you got to connect.
You have to connect with this in any kind of way you could. Yeah. They were starving for people that were connected to them. I think one of the great things that happened was like the moms and muffins and dudes and donuts.
And the dads and dudes and donuts was awesome.
It was awesome because like my dad came out. It was so many people that came out. It was like 200 people came out from the community to do this, to sit down and talk with these kids. And they began to like really see like we really like y'all. I really do like you. It's not about, I'm getting paid an extra $25,000. That does aid in the fact that doesn't aid in the fact that, you get on my nerves right now. However, like they became our kids. And so towards the end of my tenure at Carver, they made me a dean.
Yes, I remember that last year.
So I was totally out of the ESC discipline. I got into being a dean, and I was like, okay, I've done it. I'm tired. I had a girl say she was gonna kill me. That's when TikTok was just coming out.
Oh no!
She
said it to your face. She said it on TikTok.
She put it on TikTok. She made videos about how she was.
Oh, she had multiple.
It was multiple modes. Yeah, it was multiple modes of communication of how she was gonna kill me.
Wow.
But she suffered from like some mental illness and stuff like that. So I was sympathetic to that up to a point. I was like, hey, now, hey, we kind of pushing it. But I realized then I was like, man, I'm tired. And even though I understood, I was like, I went on. So I decided I moved on to Evans High School after that. I don't know how much of a break that I thought I was going to get there. But
high school though is a different.
It is.
The kids are at a point. One, their maturity level. Two, they can see their future. And three, once you get to a point where they're allowed to voluntarily leave, like drop out. Yes. The kids that are left are like, oh, I want to graduate.
The ones who want to be here.
I want to graduate.
They're the ones who want to be here. And I feel like there's a steep, like, drop off into high school discipline. So like in 100%. Middle school, they still want to keep them like in school, butts in seats, because they're in like that really transitional, like if they don't get it in middle school, their high school, they're going to struggle.
Yeah, if you pull them out of middle school, the trajectory they're on.
Yes, it's significantly skewed. And so those 3 years, like transition into high school, once they get to 9th and 10th grade, it's like it's all business. It's all business. All that stuff you talking about you was playing in middle school, we're not doing. So I applied to be a teacher in the middle school at Evans because I was just gonna go back to the classroom. Like I'm tired of going back in the classroom.
It's funny. This is gonna sound weird, but it's like, oh, that's the easy job. Like after you've done the other stuff, you just got one room to worry about.
Because I'm gonna go back to my varied exceptionality babies because I was gonna go back to self-contained. Cool. I was going to do that, and then I got a call from the assistant principal and was like, actually, the principal said he wants you to be the dean. I'm like, what? That is not what I put on my application. There. But you quickly learn that when Rolando Bailey calls you, you rise to the occasion. And I became a dean there. And so I was there for a while, and like that school has such tight systems and structures. It was nothing like I had ever seen before as far as like systems, structures, and organization. And then he set me up to get into leadership.
Awesome. So I want to come back to that, but going back to the money for a second, because it almost feels a little like, it's funny because I feel like a little weird or greedy saying, oh, we went after 20 or 25K. And I'm like, that still keeps you below like a normal human
You're
salary.
Still below the poverty line.
Or even like out west, I'm like, there's teachers starting at 80, 90, and I'm like, I went from 42, I took the 20 and I made 62, and then I took the extra, and I taught an extra period. I went up to 78, and I remember telling somebody that, and they're like, oh, that's probably about what teachers should make. Yeah. And I wonder from your leadership experience how much you think, like it was a 3-year program. We knew it was a 3-year program when we started, that the money was going to be for 3 years. But a lot of schools suffer from low morale in teaching. And there's always things that are going to be hard about teaching. But when you're paid well, the hard things aren't as hard because it's like, okay, I'm being compensated.
It's nothing like being able to pay your mortgage on time that'll just put an extra pep in your step in the morning.
So how do you think, like, do you think that could happen again? Or do you ever see like a time and place when like teachers can actually be paid well? Because I think that people are like, oh, the teacher shortage. I'm like, I already know the answer. Like we didn't have a teacher shortage at Carver Middle. We had 900 people apply for 60 positions. Like I know the solution to the teacher shortage. Do you think that could ever come to fruition?
I think it'll come after a hard crash, and I think we're headed towards that severe crash. Like some Florida institutions are closing their education departments because I remember like USF was one of the first ones I heard of that closed like their education school because people aren't going into it.
Right.
I think there was a time where people who had like other degrees like myself who came in like the 10s, 13s, 14s were coming in like as non-education degree people to come in, but you don't see that anymore because so many people can work from home. Yeah. They can make more money.
Out of high school.
Yeah. Make more money and make six figures working in the classroom. Georgia, just immediately being to the north of us, is one of them. I remember interviewing for a job, and the lady says, "Well, like, what is your salary expectations?" I was like, "Well, I'll just tell you what I make now because I never really know how to answer that question, right?" So I'll tell you what I make now, and then you can kind of tell me. And I told her, she was like, "Oh." Like almost like, how are you living?
Are you only working half time? Like, are you a half day employee?
Are you part time? Like, what is going on? I'm in leadership at this point. I'm the admin. So what are you saying? So like, I was like, oh, and so we kind of laughed about it. But it's true. Yeah. And so one of the things she talked about in that interview was the fact that sometimes it's hard for her to compete with like salaries from out west or up north, which is why people who move down here can buy houses in cash. Right. They have a significant amount of more like reserve of money, and then their student loans and all those things are paid off. I feel like it's so hard. Right. They have like fewer student debt than we do. Yeah. And they require, I think in New York, you're required to have like a master's degree or something like that.
Or at least be working on it.
Or at least be working on it. Yeah. And they are making way more money than we do. So I think that it has to hit like the bottom of, the bottom has to really fall out of it. Right. And I think they deal with a lot of in Florida is a tricky place because no matter how progressive we are, I think we're kind of still stuck in a little bit of like a time capsule as far as like political and social ideals, which influences a lot of the policies and things that go into place in education. And I always say like education is a political dumping ground. Like all the changes happen to us because we intercept everyone's like kids and issues and ideals and beliefs, and we have to navigate it. So I don't know. It's an unfortunate place I think that we're in, and on top of that, they've not cut a lot of the budgets. Like I know CBS was saying they lost close to like $30 million or something like that. And with ESSER funds going away from COVID, we are now back to like working in bare bones because we got a lot. We got top heavy a little bit, and then we also at the schools we just started hiring a lot of people who weren't sitting in front of children, and so those salaries took away from the possibility of increasing teacher salaries.
I just wonder, and was any politicians out there listening, raise those salaries, double all the teacher salaries.
If you double them,
problem solved.
Well,
and you won't need a lot of those non-classroom positions because you don't need to coach and teach teachers that are super well paid because they're motivated and they're, now they're having to apply for it and there's competition. So they'll just, like, I just naturally did better. I was more motivated to do my job well when I was paid well. But it hit me twice when I was working at Jones High School. One was when there's a McDonald's pretty much on campus there. Like it's just adjacent to the campus, and there were kids from school that worked there. And I remember the starting pay at McDonald's was equivalent or higher than what our clerks and our office staff were making, and more than like what a substitute teacher would make in a day. So I was like, why wouldn't you don't even need a high school diploma to work at McDonald's. You need a college degree to work here. And then second was when at 11 and a half years in with a master's degree, I was making within $1,000 of the new teacher next to me. And I was like, nobody gets into teaching for the money.
Nobody.
But a lot of people get out of it because of the money. Because they can't live, they can't buy a house, or you don't have a summer off because you got 2-3 jobs. Like at one point I had 3 jobs while I was a teacher, and it was like, now you're not as effective as a teacher because you're working.
Like summer work is like, I lived and died. Well, that was part of the reason actually why I got into administration. Was I needed a consistent 12-month flow, and those 2 months of not getting paid or not getting selected for summer school could set you back 6 months of like bills and financing, and even with like you can't even like get the yearly pay.
Right.
Like they don't even set it up to where you get yearly pay. You have to like save it on your own. Like, duh, I'm not good at this.
Even if you do, like, there's not enough left. So
there's not enough left. How was it when you got your first non-Carver check?
Oh, well, I remember trying to set myself up because I remember when I was at Carver, I was always saving, like, I was like, I'm going to get my master's so I can set myself up. So I remember paying for my master's while I was at Carver. And then I remember leaving, and I was like, I'd always said, because I taught 7 periods twice. I taught 7 periods 1 year at Carver. I was really making it rain that year. And I was like, I'll never teach 7 periods again.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
Like in Orange County, normally you teach 6, and then you have 1 off. And then I was
you get like
like,
extra $5,000 or something like that for teaching.
I was like, I'm going to go back. I'm going to teach 7 again. So and it's still like, even though I didn't get paid for my master's, it was twice what I would have gotten paid for my master's just to teach the 7. But it was like, this is a big hit. Like I knew it was coming, so it wasn't like a big shock, but it was still like, okay, what are we going to do?
This is life.
Got to supplement, got to find more
work,
which is just hard because teachers should be valued first. And if you pay them well, it kind of makes everything else
flow better. People have better, like higher, like aptitudes to want to do better, to be actually like advance their learning. It's one of those things now where if you are 10 years, 15 years in, it's like, what am I going to do? Because I even had that conversation with myself, like, what are my transferable skills? Like, what else am I good for out here, like in the working world? And there are plenty of things to do. So I think that's the other part of it too. I think that the school districts have to realize that the market that they are competing against, they really can't. And if people really took the time to step out and see what they could do outside of education, you would have the rate of teachers like staying, or the retention rate would be drastically decline faster than what it is now.
Well, if you can teach, you can present, you can plan, you can organize. Like there's so many
project
things
management. There's so many things that you could do, and you already have the degrees, because some teachers have multiple weeks, but you weren't even getting paid for your master's because it wasn't in your
exactly in the subject that you like, by name, the subject that you teach.
So I started my doctorate a few years ago now, and so when I started my doctorate, I didn't realize you don't get paid for having your doctorate. So it kind of slowed me down from wanting to spend more time doing it. But when you go to other states or the counties, you get paid for your doctorate there. So that was definitely an eye-opener there. So I'm just getting back into it now because I feel like it gives me a little bit of credibility out in the real world. But when it came to all intents and purposes for OCPS, it wasn't necessary for me.
I'll get ready to call you a doctor.
Yeah, next time I'm in here.
So the next episode, we'll plan for it. So you go into leadership. You went from dean to assistant principal. So I want to hear about how that went, because you became like administrator of the year, assistant principal of the year. Congratulations. How does one go from starting assistant principal to getting the highest award?
So I've been in AP now for like 5 years. This is my 5th year, closing on 5th year. And so when I got into education, I literally got a call one day. I had finished my master's, got into the pool, and I didn't apply for the job. Not coincidentally, a lot of jobs that I've gotten I have not applied for.
They applied for you.
They applied for me. And so they called and said that that I was going to go to this elementary for part-time.
Okay.
Not part-time, I'm sorry, for a short time.
Yeah, like
the person that was there was getting like surgery or something.
Temporary, like fill in.
Just fill in. Cool. You'll go. And so I was like, okay, all right, back to elementary. Been a while, but we're here. So I get to elementary school there, and they were actually have been taken over by the state. Okay. Because they had been a D or a F multiple years in a row. So I was back to dealing with the same demographic I was used to. So I got there, was there for 3 months, loved it, made good friends. That principal ended up getting promoted. And that same year, that school went from an F to a B.
Nice work.
Yes. So that school went to an F to a B. And I really focused on kindergarten through 2nd grade. Cool. So, of course, the tested areas in elementary are 3rd through 5th, but people don't realize, and I don't say people, but like stakeholders sometimes don't realize that the kindergarten through 2nd grade is where you really build a foundation of who they will be as high schoolers.
Right.
even.
They're learning they don't know what school is, so they
don't know what school
this
is.
is how school goes.
This is how school goes. And so I didn't like a lot of the coloring and activities and all that stuff. Like all that stuff is out the window. Because some kids would come in with 100 sight words and some would come in not knowing anything.
Right.
And it's because it's a systemic issue.
Yeah.
Right.
Some went to preschool, some didn't.
Some went to preschool, some didn't. Some have working parents. Some were kept by a grandmother.
Right.
Some were whatever. So you're dealing with just like a vast variation of different learning types. So I got there as an assistant principal. I was there for 3 months, and then they said they wanted me to stay longer. But at that time, high school had already reached out to me and said that I was going to be going to a high school up there, in a high school, which ended up being a Coe High School.
Cool.
So it was a little bit of a transition.
It's a
there.
Big jump. Kindergarten to 12th grade.
Well, the two head bosses who were like over elementary and over high school was like, well, I need her here, and they're like, well, I need her here. So
now they're competing.
So now
for you.
they're like, you get 2 more weeks. No, I need 3 more weeks. So it was like, all right.
So it wasn't start of the school year. You were middle of the school year.
I was middle of the school year.
Wow.
It was like COVID time-ish.
Yeah.
So it was January sometime that I went, and I stayed from January to, I believe, like March or April time frame. And so Dr. Border was the chief of high schools at the time. I don't know if you know him, but he gets his way. Dr. Border gets his way. He says
and it happens.
He says, and so shall happen. And then I interviewed there, and the principal, who was actually like one of my like very close mentors now, picked me up, and I got to a Coe High School. And at first I was like, a Coe High School, like that's not
it's not my jam.
Yeah, that's not my jam. Have you looked at my resume? Like, I am I'm gonna tell you where I've been, and you can tell me where I need to be. Y'all don't need Jones, you sure? But then I got there and I was like, oh, okay. Never mind. No, this is my jam. I'm right where I need to be.
The neighborhood's not what I thought it was.
It was the feeder. Let me look at the feeder pattern again. And so so they didn't pull from Carver, they pulled from Robbinswood.
Right.
So that was, even though Robbinswood was a little bit as higher performing than Carver was, still the same like kind of behavior, social demographics there. So when I got to a Coe High School, I served the rest of the time there as like an assistant principal up until my principal, who I was just with, got promoted to now she's a chief of academic officer.
So everybody that works with you just goes on.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what happened.
Whatever they're doing.
I'm trying to figure out. This is a good observation. Put it on my resume.
Right.
I help people.
If you're my boss, you're going to go on.
You are going to go far.
Things.
I don't know what they say in these meetings. Are y'all saying this, y'all? This is crazy.
I did get to come out a little over a year ago and see y'all at a Coe, and y'all had some good system. Whatever you guys were doing was working.
It was great. Like that was like a Coe High School has been like if to end off like at a Coe High School as an AP there, I couldn't have wrote like a better story. Yeah. And I just been blessed to have been at Carver, where I was able to like create this family.
And if you can work in a difficult situation, then anything from there, like if you can do it there, then you can take it anywhere.
You can take it anywhere.
Yeah.
And then go to a Coe and then recruit some of those people from Carver.
Yeah, y'all had there was like a reunion when I
It was
went
like
there.
a reunion. It was like, hey, hello. And not even more people who are at Carver are there now.
That's awesome.
And so just bringing those people along and on that journey, just like incorporating them into the already deep culture that is a Coe. Because a Coe is a unique place because it doesn't have a lot of alumni culture, like a Jones or Evans, because it's only been into
20 years.
Like 20 years.
Yeah.
So their alumni is my age.
Right.
We're still trying to figure out. We don't have no money. You know what I'm saying? Like we don't know.
You're not getting big checks from.
You were not getting big checks yet.
Yeah.
So their alumni is my age. So, 36, 37 years old. So it's all of the culture that's created is literally inside of the building.
Yeah.
And Dr. Karzinski was such like a phenomenal leader. I've never worked for anybody and I've worked for some pretty great people from Dorset to Bailey to her, and they were amazing. But like I learned a lot of the technical skills. From her. So I learned to build spreadsheets and all of the computer stuff and data manipulation all came from her because she basically, when I was, behavior, I was disciplined, I was ESC, and she was like, yeah, you're going to be the API. I was like, what?
better be good at spreadsheets.
Yeah, I knew nothing about like spreadsheets or data or anything. And all she did tell me was, don't F it up. That was the advice. It was like nothing inspirational, nothing. She was like, yeah, don't F it up. In those exact words.
Wow, that's awesome.
And I was like, okay, all right. And so you learn to do the job and do the job well. And anything you didn't know, she taught you.
That's a great leader.
Yeah, like she was a side by side in the trenches, like working with you and teaching you leader and stuff that I didn't even know like was possible in Excel spreadsheets. Yeah. She was doing it. And then you just kind of take it and make a life of your own. Yeah. And then she leads in the way she likes to be led, which is the same way I like to be led, which is like hands off.
I'm going to trust that you're going to do it. I'm going to ask me if you need help.
You're going to do it. And I'm going to give you just a little sentence of advice, and then I figure you're going to do the rest.
That's the best way to lead. Because if you micromanage somebody, it's like, I don't trust that you're going to do it.
Yes.
And then you're empowering people to go do the thing. And if they don't know how to do it, they learn it instead of it being done for them. And I think as a leader, I just developed that leadership style. Awesome. Just having like 30-something direct reports and then co-managing a staff of 200, you learn quite quickly of how to take your hands off of stuff and let adults do the job that they've been hired to do. Now, if it's not done, then we're going to have a different kind of conversation. Right. But I've never had a situation where somebody who was critical in the organization just wasn't doing what they were supposed to be doing. That's awesome. That's a quick plug for Excel spreadsheets right there.
It is. Excel, if they want to sponsor,
Microsoft wants to come in and sponsor.
If Bill Gates, if you're watching, is
accepting sponsorships.
Yes, at this moment.
But it's actually when I left to go to Carver, I was leaving from Oak Ridge, and she was coming in. I never met her because we didn't cross paths. It was that same time. But I remember what stood out about her was she was the first AP I saw. She was AP there. I saw she sent out, because I was still on the Oak Ridge like faculty list, and she sent out all like calendar invites to all the meetings for the next year. And it was just the level of organization was so high. And what's cool is like, I think you mentioned the systems that you had built at Evans, and it was like, if you can get all the systems and all of these things in place, you don't have to worry about all that other stuff going on because you've got a method for how you're going to do it.
And then we know exactly when the system breaks down. Yeah. So I think that's the part about like running an organization, because there are going to be times where the system breaks down for whatever reason. But if you have the systems and structures in place, we can pinpoint exactly where it happened at and address it. That's maybe it's an organizational failure, or maybe it's a personnel issue. But either way, we're going to get to the bottom of it when we get there, because there's a system in place for this. And I think that just empowered me to be a better leader, and then have transferable skills to take outside of education.
That's great. So how did you win the assistant principal of the year? Was it like a competition, or was it a point like...
I didn't even know I was nominated. So
they surprised you with it?
It surprised.
Nice.
So they have this OCASA, so it's like Orange County Association of Counselors, which to me is like just like the highest honor, right? Because it's the people that you lead are saying that you're the best at what you do.
It's not like you appointing yourself.
It wasn't like me. I was like, hey, so where's the Google form on this?
Give myself an award.
You literally have to put in the application. They have to put in the application. They have to do all the footwork. They have to get student student letters, recommendation letters. And so at the time I had like, a letter came from my football son, a letter came from my my own daughter who was a student there. My little mentee I took in who was like struggling. He was dealing with like homelessness and all that. So that he became my school son. So I'm always like adopted somebody. So all of these letters, and like my coworkers, some of the people from Carver wrote recommendation letters in. So we went to the breakfast, as we do like every year, just to like celebrate people and all the things that's happening. And I'm sitting there, I'm actually like in my phone, because I have like squirrel. I'm in my phone, and then they're reading off the description. They're like 100% grad rate. I'm like,
so somebody else did what I did. Okay.
I was like, okay, all right. But then it quickly knew it was me, because nobody had did what we did. So I knew exactly who it was when they were reading it. And then I was like, oh gosh. So the videos of me like being recorded, I was like, I put the napkin over my head, and then my family comes walking in from the side. I didn't know they were there.
Wow. So they notified them.
They notified
them.
Cool. And like it was not a dry eye in the audience, and I just kind of gave the speech about how one of the kids, actually, he went to Jones. No, he went to Oak Ridge.
Yeah.
And his name was, last name Martin, first name, I think it was Gene, something like that.
Okay.
But anyway, I saw him at a Martin Luther King event. It's like for scholarships or whatever. And so he saw me. He was like, "Hey, oh my gosh, I talk about you all the time." And I was like, "Who is this? Who is this child? What are you talking about me for?" He was like, "You remember me, blah, blah, blah." And it was a kid who I had picked up SGA. I don't know if you remember this, but I was I was a sponsor for SGA, and he was the SGA president.
No way.
And so he was like, he was just telling me like how that was the launch pad for him to go into SGA, to be at Oak Ridge, and he was sitting on the stage.
I know exactly what you're talking about now. He was wanted to start a podcast.
Yes,
I know this kid. All right, I hope you're listening out there.
Yes, him. And so I gave this speech about him.
Cool.
Because at the time, you deal with so many kids, and he had changed because I had him when he was in middle school.
So different.
I'm like,
this
later. Boy, he's grown. And right when he told me I was like, oh yes, because I know what he looks like.
Right.
And he ended up going on to be like SGA president and all this stuff at his school. And he was at this award ceremony. But I just talked about him in my speech. And I just said, like, like these awards are for the moments that we don't remember that are so impactful for the kids that we encounter like on a daily basis. Wow. And so I have kids up to me from... I had a girl come up to me like some weeks ago. She was like, "Did you coach track?" Because I was a track coach. Yeah. "Did you coach track at Gotha?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Oh yeah, my I graduated. I'm here now. I'm doing this." Wow. And I was like super proud of her. And she told me the story. She was like, "You remember that time?" I was like, "I don't remember that time, but it sounds like a good time." And she was like, "You still look good." I'm like, "What, girl? We're about the same age. What you talking about?" So yes, awesome. Just like having those like interactions with kids and being able to know that you made like an impact on them. Because in my world, I'm doing it for the supplements. To be, if I'm honest, like I need more money, so I'm a coach. I'm doing I'll do all the things to pick up. Not that I wasn't like didn't like it, but the money was like a motivating factor because you're not making that much money. And so just dealing like even with that motivation and encountering them, and people say like, "Oh, I do it from the passion." That's cute. But we all, but you in a whirlwind of like survival as a 1 through 5 year teacher. And you have all these experiences. So, it's just been a huge blessing to be able to kind of reconnect with some of those kids.
That's awesome. That's what it's all about. And you should get paid to do that extra. Like, you're having this highest calling of like mentoring and teaching and caring for these kids. And like, you shouldn't even have to justify, and I made $1,000 to coach track, which is like not like by hour. It's like $1 an hour. It was like
$2.25.
Right? But like you make that impact and like you should get paid to do that. But that's so awesome. Like, it's cool that kids remember it 5, 10, 15. I always tell teachers that even if you're just a teacher for a year, you're that kid's teacher forever. I still see kids around like a kid that I had at Carver and Jones, I saw in St. Cloud. He was doing construction, and we were both at 7-Eleven getting Slurpees. He was like, oh, like we both did the double take because he's like 7 years older and has got a beard and his hair's all different. But it's cool when, for you, it might have been like one short season or a few months or a school year, and like for them, it's
for everything.
It's so impactful.
And so, as a teacher that's had to, or an administrator too, that's had to like bury kids and speak at their funerals, I much rather see them out in the community.
Yes,
100%. And so, or doing something. And it's a few kids that like come to mind, quite honestly, that I haven't seen. Right. That I want to know where you are.
Make sure.
Like I want to know what you're doing and make sure that you're okay.
Yeah.
But it's just so crazy that you have kids that remember you, and then you have parents that think highly enough of you to be at this like occasion where they're saying goodbye to their child for the last time. So I've had two kids actually murdered by violence, and then one died in a car accident.
Yeah, I remember that the last one that was as our 3 years was ending, and I remember when I went to Jones, we lost 5 to gun violence in 2 school years.
Wow!
Like it's so bad and heavy and common that it's like it's so there's not even words for it. But when you get to know the kids and these things happen on a regular basis, like it's
you're reaching out to parents, and like I just reached out to one most recently who I found out about, and I'm like, call me if you need me. And it's hard because some of them they're either, they're losing them to either violence, or they're losing them to the system.
Yeah.
And as much as you pour into them, sometimes you only see them for 7 to 8 hours during the day, and then they're in society.
You can't undo all of the there's so many negative influences coming from all angles, and you can't undo all of it. But I think it's always a good reminder for teachers to be like, you the time you do have with them, you make an impact, and say those powerful words. And I remember like when I first started teaching, they were like, "Oh, don't touch the kids, no handshakes," and it's like, hug them and give them the handshake. Like my favorite time as a teacher was in the hallway before class, the handshakes and the high fives and the hugs. And, like to me, like the education is important, but I was reading a book and it was talking about formation, and it's forming them into who they are. And that's ultimately the most important piece.
Yeah. I had a mentor one time, and he told me that education is one of the few careers that other people's behavior determine your proficiency.
Ooh,
and so feeding into a kid's social personal life, or creating those bonds, creating those things. You can't control what they're going to do, but you can sort of try to positively impact their behavior on a day-to-day basis, so they're able to like perform academically. We can't even get to any of these things if we have all of this other stuff going on.
Yeah, 100%.
I had a kid, most notably, you probably remember this kid. We were it was my birthday.
Yeah.
We were in my room, and he comes to my room. He wasn't in my class that period. Comes to me, and he was like, "I need to use your class phone." I'm like, for what? And he's like, "I need to call my mom because I want to stay after school." So I'm like, all right. So I'm fussing. I'm like, "You knew you wanted to stay after school. Why you waiting until the end of the day? I'm going home. This is my birthday. Come in here for use this phone." I'm going to all my stuff. And he's like, and he's calling her. She's not answering. And I said, you need to get home. You need to get on the bus then, because you don't want to be here, and I'm not
waiting for you. Yeah.
So and it's too far to walk. So you need to get on the bus. So he's running to the bus, and we found out his mom had died in a car accident earlier that day.
Oh my, I remember that.
Yeah, his mom had died in a car accident earlier that day, and I had him, and I ended up meeting her when I first got into education. He was in third grade when I first met him.
She had just been in for a parent conference like a week or two.
She was
prior.
heavily involved with him.
Yes.
It was her and his little sister that was in the car. And then the stepdad or something like that. They were all in the car. Yeah. And I'm fussing at him about and like all this stuff is like happening. But that's the way I communicate with him, because I was always auntie.
100%.
And so I was like, "No, you need to get on the bus," and all this. And so then they called me that night, I believe, and they were like, that was his mom. And so he came to school the next day.
Right, I remember.
He came to school the next day, and he was in my room, and he kind of just laid his head on the desk. I was like, "Why are you here?" He said, "I can't stay home.
There's nowhere else to go."
There's nowhere to go. Yeah. He said, "The house is full of people. I don't want to be there."
Right.
And so he just hung out with me for the day. And then he started to kind of like show some behaviors, of course.
Right.
As you expect.
Yeah.
And I had to sit him down, and this was like the roughest conversation I've ever had, like with a kid. And I basically was like, bad stuff happens to good people every day.
That's good.
Bad stuff, just something really horrible happened to you.
Yeah.
But we can't, this is not going to be it.
And it wasn't because of, it wasn't because
of you.
Yeah.
And so he just started he was like, "Oh, I don't believe in God anymore, because why would God allow something like this to happen?"
Right.
And so, and I didn't get even in too much religious stuff with him. I just said, bad things happen, and you have to get up and you have to keep going.
Right.
And so he struggled for a while. His little brother ended up coming to me at Coley High School,
awesome.
But he ended up graduating from high school, doing very well
I'm
later
pumped
on.
to hear that. That's awesome.
He did. But just those kind of things that when you think about in comparison of the things that you bring to people's lives and in education, and then what education really brings to your life, it doesn't equate financially.
Yes.
But it is fulfilling, and I don't think that that's taken into consideration a lot of times.
That's a reminder that every little interaction might be little to you, but those things are happening all the time. So,
for sure.
So, all right, 2 more questions as we wrap up, because we could go all day.
For sure.
It should be fun. We got to get a sequel on the schedule.
Yes.
So
we already got a sponsorship.
And we got Microsoft.
The next one will be paid for by Microsoft.
So what words of wisdom would you share for any teachers or maybe up-and-coming administration, assistant principals for the coming school year?
I think for the coming school year, we definitely have to get back to a common sense of decorum in education. I think that we've gotten away from that on all levels, like internally and externally. Yeah. I think as education has evolved and just the roles that I've served, the wall of like professionalism between us and this has become very adversarial between us and the community. Yeah. And I think that we have to find ways to mend whatever that is.
That's good.
I do things in the role that I served in. It was all things for the betterment of these kids. Yeah. And then that's how we end up getting 100% grad rate. That's how we end up breaking like all these different records for the first time in like school history, bringing the grade from like a C to an A. Yeah. It was all intentionality.
That's good.
And there was some questions along the way. I don't want my kid to take this. They need to take that. Well, ma'am, he doesn't do well in algebra. Like, he's going to take this. Right. So knowing that I'm the professional, and I promise you, I'm going to do the right thing by your child. I had a parent come to me. She was like, I didn't want my kid to take honors, but you said he had to take honors. And I'm just so thankful that you fought against me.
Wow.
And that was a situation where, we butt heads a little bit. Yeah. But you wouldn't go to the doctor and tell him, I don't need that medicine. Right. Give me something else.
That's a good analogy.
And so I think parents have to trust the school more. Yeah. To do what's best for students. And I also think that schools have to be a little bit more transparent in the practices that we use in order to build kind of like that communication between us and parents.
That's good. That makes me think, every school and, of course, principals are like evaluated and hired and fired on the school grade and graduation rates. But I think if you focus on that, like if that's all, if you're like, all right, I'm coming in and we're getting grad rates up and we're improving our test, like kids become a number and it's like, no, I just need the transaction versus if you go in saying, I care about the kid, let's do what's best for the kid. The other stuff naturally goes up. I think about like when, like a lot of places, police officers still have a bad relationship with the community, but when I see a cop out there playing basketball with the kids or, dancing with the kid, whatever it is, it's like you build that rapport and I think then good things happen. And it's almost like doing that. Like when you show that I care about the kid first, the other stuff will come because they'll work harder knowing that, these people care about me, not just my score.
Exactly. The buy-in is definitely better there. Yeah. I think we just have an all-out societal issue between institution and people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, all right. So last question. We talked about it before you came on about you starting a podcast. So let's do this. What's happening? Are you starting a podcast?
So I am starting a podcast.
Let's do it.
I was about to say I want to start a podcast, but I know I am going to start a podcast. I'm going to speak it into existence.
Let's go.
So my sister and I, both educators, we're starting a podcast called Disrupting the Desk.
Awesome.
And so we are speaking from our positions, just going deeper into conversations like this.
Cool.
Inviting and kind of just removing that barrier between like education and the community and bringing us together, but also just like shooting, the breeze, having a conversation between sisters about like life, work, and balance.
I love it. Awesome. Well, I will link to that once you start it since it is happening. Thank you so much for driving to the studio, coming out, this is awesome. This is a great comment. Thanks for doing what you do. I'm glad we crossed paths for a few years.
Yes, listen, and look at this full circle moment.
Here we are. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in, and we'll be back for the next one.
Thank you.